Good morning.
There's only a few people on the call, and we discovered this yesterday when we had an exhibitor meeting call for Art Santa Fe and had, 10 people total out of 70 exhibitors on the call. Everybody's on vacation. So, but we've decided we're going to go through with this call, record it, and then we'll be able to send it out to everybody. You guys all know me, Eric Smith. I'm in my Wimbledon whites today. Wimbledon's coming up. I can't wait. And we got Linda and Laura, our creative director. So it'll probably be kind of nice doing a smaller call, especially in regards to our topic today is printing and multiples and that type of thing, because you'll be able to ask questions and stuff. So if you want to mute yourself for a couple minutes and we can kind of talk about the history of multiples and prints and things like that, just so you kind of have a complete understanding about all that. And there's many different ways to do printing: mezzotints, aquatints, serigraphs, silk screens, basically the same thing as a serigraph, lithographs, etchings, right? You've all seen Picasso's etchings, I'm sure, that he did on plates. And they used to be printed on stone, and they would engrave in the stone and apply the ink, and the print would come out. That's a simple way to put it. They started doing it on copper tablets, and they would do a number of pieces, and then they would destroy the tablet. Not literally destroy, break it like the Ten Commandments. They didn't do anything like that. They just erased what they had done on the tablet, whether it was copper or a stone or whatever substrate it was. And the reason that multiples became popular is people like Picasso. So Picasso got very popular. His original work started selling for lots and lots and lots of money. And if he did a edition of, we take any number, 100 pieces, 200 pieces, 400 pieces, and he signed and numbered them, they became popular because more people were, it was more accessible, right? It was much easier to buy. You could still own a Picasso, you own the name, he signed it, it was still very valuable. And those limited edition pieces started to rise in value. And I mean, I can give you a really good example. We published Keith Haring, and we did all of the pop shop pieces in the 80s, 1980s. And they're not, I used to have a number of them, and I sold them in the neighborhood of 10,000, and now they're worth, $40,000. And I paid $1,000 for them. I mean, and the money isn't that important unless you're a really, really, really famous artist. But it enabled people, Keith was doing subway drawings, and people were stealing those off the subway panels. And then he started doing paintings and doing other work, and he got very popular. And the pop shop pieces, we did editions of, I can't remember. I really can't remember. I think they were like 200. And they were only, 18 by 24, if that, even smaller. It's been a long time since I actually sold and published art. I got into the fair business in the late 90s and really haven't, published art or handled any artist or been involved with buying and selling art for, oh, I don't know, 25, almost 27 years now. Mark Shapiro, who works for us, is still very, very, very involved in all of that. And you have to stay up with it so you know the numbers. And, like I used to sell Warhols, and we were selling Marilyns at $18,000, and today they sell for $250,000. But there's different colors that sell at different prices, and they have to be in good shape and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that go along with that. But anyway, going back to my original thought process was, that's how print started. They just started in allowing more people to buy your work. So, Renee and Mary Lynn, if you were to take your landscape, your trees, and you were to do prints of those today, personally, I don't think they would transfer into a digital print with the same feeling and effort and desire that you had them to look like, right, as your originals. I just don't think that would work. You know,
We've had the same thought.
Our work
Yeah.
is in wax.
Our work is tactile.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
Your work would translate more into like lithography or even like a mezzotint or something that's got softer
Mm.
pieces to it. You might even do like you could do like a digital print of the hard lines and then actually touch up over it with even what do you call it? Opaque, like an opaque watercolor type thing or something to soften it up, right?
Mhm.
You have to experiment with all of that type of stuff to see how your work would translate into, let's just call it multiples. And then the multiples usually sell for a lot less money than original. So for instance, with Keith Haring's originals, well, let's do somebody more common. You could look up Mark King, Markking. He paints landscapes with a palette knife. He used to be, I don't even know if he's still alive. We published him for many years. He was really fun to be around. He smoked like a chimney. Oh my God. Even in the gallery during the shows, he would run out and smoke and come back in. But he painted these great landscape paintings with a palette knife and acrylic paint. And they were very thick and lots of texture to them. Well, his multiples that we did were serigraphs. And the serography can create some kind of texture on there. And then you guys all probably remember Thomas Kincaid. He would come in and he'd have a bunch of assistants hand paint, touch up, areas of it, which kind of gave it a little more pizzazz than a regular print. And they would sell those for more money. So there aren't any hard and fast rules in creating multiple for your work. And you really need to think about if I was an artist and I could only paint and I was like a photorealist or I was a really good landscape painter and I could only do, 12 to 20 or 12 to 15 images or paintings a year, I would highly consider doing multiples because you'll be able to sell more work, right, at a reasonable price. Let's say your originals are $10,000 and you can only paint 12 a year. Well, that's 120 grand a year. That's if you sold it direct to the consumer, direct to a collector, and didn't go through a dealer or anything else, right? And that's a small business. You might have to go do your own multiples and not hire somebody, and you might have to work on all that by yourself. And that leaves you less time for painting. If you're somebody that can paint and be prolific and paint 200 or 300, there's a lot of artists that can paint 200 or 300 pieces a year. You don't need to do multiples at all if you can, sell enough of your original work. And people would rather buy an original painting than they would print sometimes. This print behind me was done by the art police, and it's I think it's like a 4-color lithograph. And they did these to raise money for a mural they're painting in Fort Lauderdale area. And the reason that I bought it was to help support the mural, the original mural. The building was being renovated and they had to redo it on another building. So they were only 250, $300 or something. And they did an addition of 100 to raise 30 grand so they could go paint this mural. And so, and they were at our show at Red Dot and they were really fun to meet. So I bought a piece and just put it in my office. But, there's other artists like you guys probably all see if I can move this. Takashi Murakami, right? He's a famous Japanese artist, somewhat like Keith Haring in that he's created that whole style of happy faces and you know who he is. And his pieces sell, his multiples sell for $3,000. And he makes good money. I think I paid 1,800 bucks for that at the Broad Museum in LA. And uh, just because our son Kyle collects that stuff, so I bought him one and I ended up buying one for myself. But um, he makes good money on his multiples. A lot of you've probably gone to these street art fairs and people are selling them for $100. Well, it just depends on how much you're having. And they're probably this big, right? And it just depends on how much you're having them printed for, and how many you want to inventory. So in the old days, in the 80s and 90s, in order for an artist to get multiples done, you usually had to go through a publisher unless you wanted to lay out $25,000 to do 300 silk screens, serigraphs. And then you had to do them. And the reason it cost so much to do it is because you had to do all of them at once. So they burn all the screens, they squeegee on one color, they put it on a rack to dry, and they do that 300 times if you're doing an edition of 300. So you've got 300, archival paper sitting up on racks drying, and it takes whatever 4 days to dry. They pull it off and they squeegee on another color, and that goes up on the rack to dry. Well, we used to do 28 color serigraphs with Hiro Yamagata. Well, they were not cheap, but Yamagata's pieces sold for $3,800, the multiple, the serigraph, and we wholesaled those at $1,800. And as soon as we came out with an edition, we sold everyone within a week. He was that popular. So number one thing is get popular. Number two thing is, you start doing multiples if that fits your um, if it fits your medium. Shireen, I don't really see Eric doing multiples of work unless you hired somebody that something became really popular and you hired somebody. Your work isn't going to translate into prints. So now in today's market, and I don't remember when, but I'm going to guess around the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw a big change at Art Expo in that serography was no longer needed because digital printing came along, and they did a pretty good job with it. In digital printing, they capture your image with let's just call it a super deluxe camera. And then the super deluxe camera, the information is fed into a digital printer and basically printed on to your archival paper. And you could do one piece at a time because you're not pulling screens, you're not doing it mechanically, you're doing everything digitally. And so that digital image can be stored somewhere, and you can call up your printer and say, I need 5 pieces, and you don't need a publisher, you don't need anybody to do anything for you anymore. You have total control of the entire process. And then you have a responsibility there too to make sure that you're numbering each piece properly and creating certificates of authenticity and all of that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the history of, there's a lot more history to printing, but in today's world, in 2025, going back, 30, 40 years, that's about even 100 years. That's kind of how it all worked. That's how the printing process worked. I like prints. Ed Ruscha is one of my favorite artists. I love his work. He does a lot of prints that you can buy from Ed Ruscha and Keith Haring, obviously. Andy Warhol, that's all he did. You look at Andy Warhol's original works are still silk screens. He didn't sit there with a brush painting. He did some drawings. He did some drawings of shoes and things when he was decorating windows on Fifth Avenue, right? And he did some drawings, but all of his work was silk screen. It was screen printed. When he did, 10 Marylands, they're silk screen. But some of the work was original. We used to own a piece called 210 Coke bottles, and it was big. It was probably 12 feet by 12 feet. It was a really big piece. And we bought that in 1984, 85 at auction at Christie's in New York for $1 million. And when I say we, I say my company that I work for, Martin Lawrence Galleries. And Marty Blinder, the head of our company, our CEO, was a big collector, and he bought it on behalf of Martin Lawrence Galleries. He used the company money to buy it. And we paid $1,050,000. And it was the first Warhol ever sold over $1 million. And we bought it. And years later, the business changed, and digital printing started coming in, and our business started falling off a little bit. And we had to close a few galleries, and we needed cash, and we sold that painting to a guy in Switzerland for 8 million, like 7 years later. And that sounds like a lot of money, but it wasn't. It was like, for our company, we just needed the money, right? But yeah, 210 Coke bottles. I think he still owns it. It's a guy in Switzerland. His last name is Amon, and I think he still owns it. I haven't seen it come to auction in years, so. But yeah, so that's the way Warhol painted. But does anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand or chat or unmute and.
Well, there were some questions. Sophie's not on the call today, but she sent me some questions. One of her questions was, how do you decide which paintings to make prints of? And then after that, how many do you make of each one? And I guess from my experience, some of you know that I used to work for Thomas Kinkade. And honestly, everything that Eric said, and it was early, the early 90s when giclée printing started. And up to that point, Kinkade had this whole production facility. And honest to God, we had a warehouse full of these printed pieces of paper because you had to print the whole run. So if your edition size was 100, you printed all 100 pieces of paper. And back then, at pretty much as fast as Kinkade could print it and produce it, it was sold. It was, and he did not sell originals. He painted an original, and then that original was high resolution color captured. And then after printing technology evolved, we had our own printers, large, huge Canon and then HP printers that were specially developed. And we were one of the places, Kinkade was one of the places where some of that early giclée printing was tested. So then at that point, you could say your edition size was whatever it was, and literally, like Eric is saying, print them out on demand. So they wound up with this whole warehouse full of paper. And we would joke, too bad there isn't a fire. Because it was a huge warehouse full of racks and racks and racks and racks of paper.
Yeah, but kind of leads into the answer to Sophie's question is, the prints aren't worth anything until you sell it, right? So you would want to do your best pieces and something that you're known for and something that's appealing and something that has a story behind it, and all of the same reasons that you would, sell an original piece of art, or the reason somebody would buy it would be the same for the printing. And then the size of the piece would be, important too. And it's just that not all originals translate to digital printing at all. And sometimes they don't look anything like the original. Sometimes they might look better. Who knows? You have to go out and try it. Right? And if you're not selling enough of your original work, there isn't any reason to do prints. If you can keep painting and supplying inventory and selling work to at least be an artist in a hobby way, or if you can make it to a professional way by making enough money to support yourself, that's great. Then you should probably start looking into doing prints. Linda, there's no reason for you to do a print. You would just do multiples of your photography, right? This would be an edition of 25 pieces. I would keep them really, really low. Low editions are really great. And the reason for that is, let's just do the economics. Let's say you went out and you took an original painting that was 24 by 24 and you made a print that was 24 by 24. And the painting sells for 5,000. You could do 20 prints and you could price them at $495. The original work, the way that I would sell that is, the original work is 5,000. I'm releasing an edition. It's one original at 5,000 and it's only 20 prints. So less than one person in every state, even if you did 50, you could say only one person in every state, right? Or if you did 20 and you sold them, you're going to make 10 grand. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And you do a big email on it. There's only 20 available. Shipping is included. Framing is on your own. It comes in a tube, right? I mean, brilliant. And it seems to me it'd be pretty easy to sell 20 prints if it was a really good image and you had a good following and you have, I don't know, 500 people on your email list and, that type of thing. And you could do another drop. That's what they call those type of things. 6 months later, or even 3 months later. And if you got to do 4 a year and you were doing 10 grand, that's an extra 40 grand in your pocket, right? Less the cost of everything. So, and the cost isn't very much. That's an idea, but print editions have come way, way, way down. And the reason they've come down versus doing 400 or 300 is because you don't have to do them all once anymore. And before you had to get that money back and you had to do a number of pieces to get all that money back that you threw out at the beginning. You don't have to do that today. So,
one of the things that's important, and Eric mentioned it, is your certificate of authenticity. When you're doing limited edition prints, if you're just doing prints, that's kind of like just doing posters or something. They're not signed, they're not numbered. Then that doesn't matter. But if you're doing limited edition prints, a certificate of authenticity is really important because it clearly identifies how many of these prints there are. And the other thing that I think is important is creating a strategy for your limited editions. And that strategy can go on the certificate of authenticity. And here's what I'm talking about. So just like Eric is talking about, so you've got an original, and let's say that original is 30 by 30. So there's a strategy that the original is the largest piece. So it's 30 by 30, and your print then is smaller. So maybe it's 24 by 24 or 28 by 28, but you let the original hold that position. And that creates the value for the original, number one, as well as is reflected in the value for the limited editions. On your certificate of authenticity, it states how many of these 24 by 24s you've printed and how they've been printed. They're printed as a giclée print on linen canvas. And then there's a paragraph, and I'm happy to share this with, because at Kincaid, you can imagine, we created a lot of certificates of authenticity. So the language that's on that certificate is important in that it leaves it open for other sizes and other fabrications in the future. So that if you decided you wanted to do a 24 by 24 on aluminum, that's different than the 24 by 24 on canvas. So a certificate of authenticity properly worded leaves that open for you to have that opportunity. It also leaves it open for other sizes. Sell the 24 by 24 out, and now you could do, like Eric was talking, a 20 by 20 and issue it in a edition of 25. And I think it's important that you do these drops strategically. So if you're thinking about printing, think about how you're doing it, and how many, and which ones of your originals are the best ones to consider for printing. And all of those that are limited edition should be signed and numbered. So if you're doing a print edition of 20, each one has a number, and each one of those certificates identify that number. So it's 1 of 20, 2 of 20, etc. And that's right on the print and your signature. So one of the other questions, Eric, that Sophie had was, what about other products other than prints? T-shirts, Christmas cards. We're really talking about licensing then. Or if you're going to self-produce those, that's certainly also available today. Just go on Etsy and see how many people are doing exactly that. I have a really good friend who I just saw her daughter recently, and she's an artist. And she does some pretty cool pop art kind of things. And she recently had one of her art pieces produced as a jacket, a silk jacket. And it's beautiful. So there's those kinds of options and opportunities as well. But I think that obviously the most common form of reproduction is as a limited edition print.
Yeah. I mean, Saatchi Art has another, Saatchi Art was sold to Graham Holding Company. Lady used to, they used to own the Washington Post. And Saatchi has a sister company called something. I don't remember the name of it. And you can license your artwork to them, and then they advertise the artwork on shower curtains and coasters and every single thing in the world. And you get a miniature percentage of, the sale, because they're doing everything. All they're doing, you're just licensing your image. That's nothing that I would get into I mean, if you become a very popular artist, it's probably something worth doing. I mean, you see Keith Haring and Andy Warhol and Basquiat stuff everywhere, right? Picasso, everything.
It was a big business.
It's all licensed. Yeah. If you're a very, very famous popular artist and people want your images, but concentrating on printing today is, if it can expand your business, then, I'm all for it. It's an inexpensive way for some people to collect art and still feel like a really good, like a collector, and keep around you, and for you to keep in touch with them. So I'm all for it.
You'll see at our fairs that there are some artists that they'll have a print rack. I think the important part about that is making sure that the prints are well presented. You don't want to do a print that ever discounts or takes away from your original work. So your originals are up on the wall and you've got a print rack. So whatever's in that print rack also needs to be really well presented. If they're paper prints, then they're matted, they're in cellophane sleeves, and the certificate of authenticity is there, so that all of that is there. It's a complete package, and it represents you and your brand as well as the originals on the wall do. And that's important. The other piece of it is it gives people an entry point. You know, what we've said so many times before, the easiest person to sell something to is someone you've already sold something to. So if you're at a fair and you're selling a print, you're going to take that information just because they've got one of your limited edition prints. You want that information. You want that provenance of where it's gone. And you want that contact information because you're going to keep in contact with them. Let them know about maybe the next piece that drops a limited edition, or maybe your next new original that would be great companion to go with the piece that they just collected. So it's an entry point for a lot of purposes, not just as a price point, and giving someone something that they can take away, but also an entry point for you with a new collector.
Any questions? Just go ahead, Sarah. Unmute.
I have a lot of questions, but let me see. Just, is it okay to print using my regular printer on a cardstock, but maybe have a cheaper price or something? Would that be a okay quality?
Well, you just have to judge that for yourself how it comes out. Lots of printers today are really, really, really terrific and do a really good job, and a lot of people do that. So that's really small things that sell for $20 something. That's just kind of, in our world, that's really not our bailiwick. That's really not what we're looking for at our shows as much. We're looking for, prints could be $200, $250, but we're really looking for the original work to start at a minimum of 1,000 and go up to 100,000 or whatever it may be. So that's a completely different business. It might be on your website, but it's not something that we encourage at our shows. We'd rather have people selling, even limited edition prints at a minimum of like $200. I see it at our shows. I mean, I see some stuff, people bring that, and we discourage it, but we don't.
Okay. And do you have an example of the certificate of authentication? I have a very generic one, but I want to know what's a good example from you guys.
It's really it's just the information that's on there. So it's title, artist, number in the edition if that's applicable. It's signed by either the artist or the gallery representing the artist. And it has a price on there, a value, and it's really more a value than anything. You might have paid, $4,000 for a piece, but it's valued at $5,000, and the certificate could say $5,000, but you got $1,000 off, because the value is really for them to take the certificate and show it to their insurance company if they want to insure it. What we used to do when some of these artists were going up in value, which they did. I think Andy died in 1987 and Keith Haring died in 1988 or 89. I don't remember. But the value started going up quickly. And value doesn't go up just because an artist dies. It doesn't happen every time. So don't fake any deaths out there or anything. But I would reprint certificates and sign them and send them my collectors and let them know that the value is going up. And if you're interested in buying more work, we're here. But turn this over to your insurance company so you can insure the piece for more now today, And sometimes it was substantial, but it's a good sales tool. Because even if value goes up $1,000, it's a way to reach out to your customer.
You know, if
Thank
if
you.
anyone is interested, I have a couple of templates. Just email me, linda@redwoodartgroup.com, and I can send you some COA templates.
So Cohart, which is sponsoring a number of our events and kind of partnered with us, their new tool, their app is pretty slick. And, I mean, I've owned this company for 16 years, and a lot of people have come along and they've presented things to me like, hey, look, I got this new app, and you take a picture of the art and then it shows it in a living room. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's great. And it's going to be the next biggest thing. And I mean, we have had a number of technological presentations given to us. This one is spot on. It does everything that an artist needs to have done. And it was created by people that came from the art world. And then it's backed by four or five venture capital companies, gave them seed money. I think they raised 5.5 million. And Paris Hilton is involved, I think, just as a name. But it's slick, and they're getting traction very, very, very quickly. Not something that we're involved in, but it's something can definitely help you. They're only collecting 1% when you charge somebody for a piece of art, they're only collecting 1%. Well, it saves you 2 or 3% right there. You can print a certificate, you can manage your inventory. It's all done on one app, and it's really easy to navigate and use. They'll be at all of our events in a booth and supporting artists, and I can kind of see them over the next couple of years really ramping up. And it's all free. It's a freemium product. Eventually, as you grow, they'll start charging you. And I think their platinum product right now is $79 a month, which is going to be $960. Well, $948 a year exactly. And then that's what your whole system would be. I wish that the trade show business had a $948 software program, because we spend $2,000 a month on software licensing alone, right? Yeah, I mean, that sounds cheap to me, really cheap. But you do the math and try to find out what their model is, and if they've got 5,000 artists spinning, there's 500 grand, so they can ramp that up pretty quickly. But it's a good product, and the people running it do a really good job, and they're very service oriented and to the point, and yeah, good to work with. So we've enjoyed it so far.
Eric, I listened to their Zoom the other day. I was part of the Zoom call that they put on. They seem very competent, and it's a very interesting program. I'm looking into it. And the $79 a month piece that they will have or have now includes website hosting, at least as I understand it. So it's I haven't fully looked into it, but I'm going to, and it looks really interesting.
Yeah, it's an all-in-one.
Very nice.
We signed up, and we've uploaded the pieces for Santa Fe, and we've printed off our labels with a little QR code on it.
Right.
I mean, they gave us the name, and then you just cut and print and put them on a sheet. So we're going to go ahead and give it a shot. They also have a pro plan at like $19 a month that allows you to keep, allows you to control your inventory and collect names for your website and send out
emails.
So we're going to try that. It's still a little bit more expensive than our website is, but it's doing a lot more than our website does. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you get, a number of artists on one site, and eventually the public starts paying attention to it, and they might discover you by shopping around or something. I could see them not taking every artist in the world like Saatchi does, because there's just too much. It's just too hard to navigate. But if they get into which they're doing right now, I think they're going to do the Hampton show, all of our shows, and they did like super fine. And they're really geared towards artists, more so than galleries right now. So anyway, that's all I have to share on prints. If you guys have any questions, you can email me, Eric@redwoodartgroup.com, and I'd be happy to answer them, or call me. And then, does anybody else have any questions before we sign off for today? Stay cool. It's 114 here today.
Oh,
Linda, I thought we were going to discuss just briefly, how do you know when you get these notices for shows? Sort of, we had a notice for a show up in BC or Vancouver.
How to know if if they are good and viable show.
I mean, you gave us some good tips about look at who was there, look at how many people attended, look at how long they've been around, but
thank you for reminding me. Really, the question, Eric, was, so if you get an invitation for show XYZ, it's out of your perspective in terms of, your state, your city. It's maybe not even in your country. How do you research to figure out who they are and if it's the right fit for you? One of the things that I said to Rennie and Marianne was, look at their exhibitor list. Look at how many exhibitors they have, and what kind of a show is it? Is it a festival? Is it out on the street? Is it inside? What are the obligations of the exhibitor in terms of what's provided? And then look at what kind of publicity they've had. Look at press releases, see what they say about themselves. And how many years have they been in business? Some fairs, and I sit on a director's call. It's a monthly fair director's call. Most of the people that are on the call are producers of street fairs and very local events. Some of them are members of the city council or members of the city art and culture committee, and they create a street fair or some kind of a festival. The other thing to figure out is what is this? Some of the there was a very for years a very famous festival. It was the Sausalito Art and Wine Festival, and it was well attended, and a number of the exhibitors that do our fairs did the Sausalito, and you had to be juried in. And just because you were juried in last year doesn't mean you're going to be juried in this year, kind of thing. So they and it was run by the city. And it didn't come back from the pandemic. And so, what's the intention of the event? And the Sausalito event really became a lot about wine and music, almost to the detriment of the art. So, well, and then the other thing to think about and find out is, what does it cost? So maybe if it only a lot of street fairs and festivals are very inexpensive, but you also have to provide everything. So you've got to bring your walls, you've got to have your own setup, your own lights, and they give you a space on the street. There's a big one that happens in the town next to me, the Lafayette Wine Art Festival, and it's on the street, and you can see a couple of weeks in advance, you start to see the chalk marks literally on the street, and they close down like 5 blocks of the main street of the town. But then the exhibitors, that's all you got. You've got a piece of the street. So, those are all the things that I would look at. And then if you can, you look at the exhibitor list. Do you recognize anybody on the exhibitor list? Even if you don't, see if you can get their contact information. Call them. Find out how it was. Ask questions. And that's really probably the best way. Some of them we know about. The one you asked me about, I wasn't familiar with. It was the Toronto Art Fair, I think. Was that what it was?
I got
You
one
mean-
from Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was
Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah, there's there's three big art fairs. Well, Vancouver one's pretty small, but the Artist Project in Toronto, that's a pretty good fair.
Yeah.
I've been to it multiple times. And then there's the Toronto Art Fair. That's where I bought some of the walls. They were selling some walls years ago. Ship them to me. And that's a pretty good show, but that's just for galleries. So I would just say that, I would go back 10 steps and say, here's what my budget is for the year. And if you're running your business like you should run your business, which is creating a budget and sticking to it for a year, you can manage your budget as you go, as things transgress, as things go on. Look at today. I mean, there's a lot of problems going on in the world, right? And we don't know how they're going to affect us down the road. But what we can do is take certain precautions as we go, and you can call them whatever you want in business. A lot of private equity groups call them parachutes or, rip cords, things like that, where you can cut costs as you go if things go south. I mean, and I'm not going to get at all the negativity going on in the world right now, but there's just a lot of noise going on out there. And right now there's a lot of people on vacation. They're probably just like, I don't want to listen to it anymore. I'm going to go to Yosemite or something. I wish I was up, hiking somewhere. But, plan a budget at the beginning of the year. We do. And we try to stick to those budgets, and that you should already have your kind of shows planned out for the year. I mean, if you looked at Redwood Art Group shows, and we have the two in Miami and then Santa Fe in New York and San Diego, obviously our two fairs in Miami and New York blow away all the other fairs because there's a bigger population, and Miami is a crazy fair because there's so many going on anyway. I mean, we have over 35,000 people go through the fair. Now, that's more people than an artist or a gallery is going to see in 5 years walking through their gallery. There's no way 35,000 people go through a gallery in 5 years. You can't beat it. And same in New York, we have really big crowds there, over 20,000 people. And then if you want to find dealers, I would go to Santa Fe, and hopefully I would invite some of the art dealers. Here's my work. That would be a good way to expand your distribution network into Santa Fe, which is 200 plus galleries, by trying to find a dealer there. And that's the reason, if I was an artist, I would be going to San Diego or Santa Fe. And the same in San Diego. And like, if we end up doing a show in LA, which I would like to do, it's the same way to expand your business there. Those are all really big spots. Chicago's another good spot, right? And those are big cities, and that's what I would do. Dallas, but Dallas already has a couple fairs in it, so we're really not looking at that. We did a show there before, and it was okay. It was fine. It could be a place to go back. I just didn't like the facility.
So Eric, personally, we vote for Chicago or LA.
Okay.
I wish you could find one in Chicago because
they
really need a good fine art show there, because the one of a kind art show is not one of a kind of anything.
Was that at the merchandise
The
mart?
merchandise mart.
Yeah. And it was on like the floor 12 or something?
7.
Seven.
We used it. We had a free booth this year because we won something last year, and we just used it to dump all of our old work. And believe it or not, we did.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, it was dirt cheap, but we sold a lot of old work, and we actually had somebody come up and go, "Where are your trees?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, we only have showing a couple because we're highlighting our original, our early work.
I see you're becoming a salesperson too. We're highlighting.
Yes.
Let me show you our.
Yeah,
That's funny. Anyway, that's how I would kind of plan my shows. I mean, there's the other art fair. They do a number of shows, Chicago, Dallas, Brooklyn. And I mean, when I go to those, it's a little bit of a younger crowd, kind of like some really obscure art. Things are kind of really inexpensive. They pile a lot of work on the wall, and they're doing a decent job. I mean, they've had success, and they've got this model, but they take a percentage of your sales. They process all this. It's a different model than we do. So I don't know. But yeah, the Vancouver show, it's a long way to travel. Vancouver's super expensive. That show's been going on a while though, but I can't remember if I went there. I think I have been there before, years ago. Yeah. If you go, let me know.
Yep.
No.
Small.
No, we decided no.
And and we decided against it.
No.
Yeah.
Shireen, you had your hand up a little while ago.
I was just gonna, somebody touched on it a bit, I think, but we spend a lot of time networking with other artists when we're at a show, just kind of seeing where they're going, what's going on. It was interesting at the other art fair, as Eric was saying, they have different locations, and there were a lot of international artists over, and they were all saying that they're doing the US based shows because all of the international based shows are really slowing down a lot. So it's just interesting. Like at that show, we saw a lot more print selling. We sold originals, obviously, and other people were, but it was a very print heavy show. Like Eric was saying, a younger show. But, I'll get on the phone and we'll call artists, and don't be scared to call artists similar to you, like don't get into that competitive mind frame. I mean, obviously if they're doing a show and they do something that's kind of your price point, your aesthetic, like, or just at least what you think would be a similar customer, that's a good person to call. And I know we did a show in Texas that was our worst show ever, but great organizers. It was just a new show that we took a chance on. It was close by. It was inexpensive. Everything about the show was great, the foot traffic, just nobody was buying anything anywhere similar to what we were doing. So we took a chance on it. I called maybe 6 or 8 different artists, and a couple of them got back to me and said, hey, the organizers are great. It's a beautiful location. And, you at least get some groundwork info. And then I was just going to say, if you're doing outdoor markets, I haven't really found anything that does this for this type of, Redwood Art Fair. But if you are still doing some of the bigger, finer outdoor art markets, there's a couple really good Facebook pages. One of them's Art Fair Reviews, and there's another one too. But they've got somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people on it, and people will break down costs, ease of setting up. It might be an area in Florida that used to only have one market, and now there's 10 different organizers doing stuff, and they're like, it's just too diluted of a market, for example. So there's some actually really good Facebook reviewing going on. But again, that's more of the art outdoor type of thing than this. I think that's what I've got.
There's a lot of outdoor fairs in Florida.
Yeah. A lot.
Like every weekend, there's something going on during the season up until, April or so. Yeah.
We know an artist that does real good art, but it's sculptural that can go outside. And they literally go down to Florida for 3 months. And in between their fairs, they jump on a cruise ship. And then they come back and they do another one. And then they go and jump on another cheap cruise ship. And they just book it. Fair cruise ship, fair cruise ship. we looked into it, but we're not really an outdoor type of art that works for us. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of amazing stuff going on like that if you're wanting to do stuff. So
You'll be known as a gypsy.
I worked with a fine art photographer, John Scanlon, and he did pretty much, that was his gig, is he did outdoor fairs across the country, and he had, you know, a truck, big panel truck set up to rack his paintings in, and some of his paintings were very large, and he would drive that truck down to Florida at the beginning of the season. And he lived in, where did John live? He lived in the Midwest, and probably still lives in the Midwest. And then leave the truck there. And he had a guy in Florida that would drive this truck to the next spot, and he'd fly back down there and do the weekend, fly home, or do like Shireen is talking about. He and his wife would fly down, and then they'd go off on a holiday for a week, and then they'd show up, you know, in Coconut Grove the next weekend or wherever. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole different gig than you know, what we're talking about or what we do. But you know, it's certainly something that works for a lot of people. So, you know, and maybe there's a combination that works for you. Some of our fairs, some of these outdoor festivals, and maybe you put into your plan, your budget, doing one that's more local. So like Shireen said, you know, they did the Texas show because it was nearby. They didn't have to travel. So, you know, they took a shot on it. And maybe some of that is worth a try. So I think, you know, some of it's trial, but
there's a couple of really good art fairs that are outdoors. Park City does one.
Yes.
And then La Quinta does one. Ann Arbor used to be a major show. And when I had sold my company years ago to a company in Cleveland and lived there for a while, I went to Ann Arbor, and it was 90 degrees and humid, and everybody was miserable. Now, the show is a great show, and they sold a lot of work. But I'm going to tell you something. Every artist that I saw that I had known from Art Expo was like, I'm never coming back here. They were sweating. And, you know, I mean, that's the difference between being in an air-conditioned room and coming up to me and saying, can you turn the air down because I didn't bring my jacket? Or, you know, sweating out in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, I've been to La Quinta where they've had a windstorm and booze have tumbled over, you know. So that part's hard. But the outdoor shows, I mean, La Quinta did $3 million last year. There's 200 and something artists. That's about $15,000 per booth. Now, not everybody did that, because I know Jeffrey's Glass sold, you know, 3 or 4 commissions to people here in my club, and that was 35,000. So he probably did 100 grand, you know, where other artists who did nothing, you know, but on average, they did about 3 million in sales. So we do a lot more than that in Miami and New York by far, but you know. Yep, Shireen.
I was just gonna say, if you haven't gone to Miami, you got to go to Miami. Like, it's such a fun show. There's so many people. There's people buying. There's people looking. I mean, even if you don't sell anything, just to get 30,000 people's feedback of what they like about your art. But I mean, people buy. It's the best show. Like, it's so much fun. So if you haven't done it yet, but I'm just gonna say this, like, get a booth before you're buried in the back, because it's so much more fun to be where you've got good visibility, as Linda and Eric will tell you, than kind of back in the weeds. So but I just can't say enough about how much fun and how well organized Miami is. And it's a longer show too. So it's like you get to actually enjoy it versus set up, sell for a few days and break down, you know. But can't say enough about how awesome Miami is.
Oh yeah, you already have your booth, 1,200.
Yeah, same one.
Yeah.
Same one. Right
Yeah,
on
we
the
like
main
that.
island. They figured
Yes.
that out pretty
Yeah,
fast.
you gotta be there. It's so much fun. And there's so many people, and they're people that it's not just looking for like bright art like Eric's or classic art. There's literally so many people there that there's somebody for everybody. It's just a really fun, vibrant art community from all over the place. You'll talk to people from everywhere. You won't be bored.
Ditto.
Yeah.
And it's also just watching it, just even being able to sit and watch what goes on is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of it's like, wait, what's that? Yeah.
I only have the bright art in my office, okay? The rest of the house. All
Okay,
right.
guys. Well, this has been a great call. Thank you. And take a look at Cohort. We will see you, some of you in person at Art Santa Fe, and then the next call will be just after Art Santa Fe.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Hi,
Bye.
everybody.